Joining me now this morning is the longest-serving CEO of the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, the most influential body of professional accountants in the world. He is also the CEO of the American Institute of Certified Professional Accountants. Good morning, Mr. Barry Melancon.
Good morning, Shania. It's great to be with you in your beautiful country.
Thank you. Just to get the ball rolling, as the longest-serving CEO of the AICPA, why would you say you embarked on a career in this field?
Well, I'm biased because I think professional accountancy is critical to making the world work. And I think the people who sort of give their lives to being professional accountants are, by and large, highly ethical, and they want to do the right things, and they make a difference. And so it's a very positive environment to be able to represent them and to help elevate the impact that they bring to every corner of the globe. And also, our profession is the most global of all professions. If you think of, for instance, medicine or law, they're very important professions, and they deal with medicine in a particular country or the laws of a particular country. Professional accountancy deals with it in the uniqueness of a particular country and on a global basis, because obviously business is extraordinarily global. So I think it's a very critical component of our global economy and the national economies of each country, and so therefore it's a great place to be, and you can make a big difference.
And do you see any gaps in this field in Sri Lanka?
Well, I think there's gaps in this field every place. As I just said, it's very global. I think one of the places there's gaps is that we live in an incredibly fast-moving world, right? And it's a complex world. And so everyone in our profession has to be committed to changing their skill sets. If you could imagine someone who's mid-career, has another 20 years to work in this profession, what will they be doing in the next 20 years? If you think back how it's changed in the last 20 years, it's tremendously different, and it's going to be even a bigger gap of differences into the future. And likewise, as we train young people to enter the profession, we have to be very agile in what we're expecting them to know, and having the facilities and the capabilities of educating them so they can be extremely productive when they go to work, whether it's in government or the corporate world, and really make that difference. So skill sets is number one. And then I think number two is the attitudinal notion of everybody in our profession can do a better job of being committed to change, agile decision making, and acceleration, because everything in the world is revolving around that today.
You've outlined some points that Sri Lanka could very much gain from. What would you say is your mission here?
Well, Sri Lanka is very important to us specifically as an organization. As you said in the introductions, we have upwards of 700,000 members and students around the world. We have a very long history in this country. We have a very big, significant commitment here. We have thousands of members. We have thousands of students that are in the pipeline to become. So, obviously this country has had a tough year or so, a tough couple years maybe. When you add COVID, maybe a tough 2 or 3 years. And I think it's important to be here to show support. It is a place that we are going to continue to be supportive of, and that's one of the real reasons why I'm here. And then also our members here celebrate once a year their commitment to the organization's commitment to them, and so that's all tied into this visit as well.
Thank you. And in your opinion, where exactly did Sri Lanka go wrong, apart from the obvious fiscal mismanagement? What in your opinion, should Sri Lanka have avoided?
Well, first off, I think it's very easy to look back and second guess, right? I think in our profession, we try to put checks and balances into making the best possible data-driven decisions. But we also talk about long-term value creation. And so from a government perspective, I think it's very important to think about policies versus in the long run. Now, that's very difficult because what the population wants is immediacy. They want less taxes and more services and lower cost and all of those types of things. And so, leaders, and I don't think this is just specific to Sri Lanka, but I think leaders have to find that balance between short-termism and long-termism, and that's a tough task. And voting and the population can pull you to short-termism. I think first off, as a citizen of Sri Lanka, and I'm not an expert in every detail here, but what I would say is we tend to, as citizens of a country, any country, we tend to be overwhelmingly people about short-termism. And I think long-termism is important. And then, obviously, you have to be fiscally sound. You can't overly spend. Clearly, I think those things caught up here in a sort of a complicated web. COVID didn't make it better. Unfortunately, even some of the responses in the last year where you've had some of the difficulties actually muted some of the tourism in this country, which is a big part of the country's economic reality. So it sort of snowballs. But deficit spending around the world is a big problem. It just sort of caught up here quicker than I think other places.
Yeah. In the recent weeks, Sri Lanka has amended their tax system, and it has come under heavy scrutiny by society. How would you advise Sri Lankans to prepare their finances to bear the burden?
Well, I think I'm not expert in that, right? So I've learned a little bit about it in preparing to come here, and I know it's a tiered system and things of that nature. And in some places, people are paying taxes that previously didn't, based on their income levels. I think the most important part is that you have to. I mean, unfortunately, with inflation, it makes it very difficult. There's going to be an adjustment into disposable spending, and you have to be able to think through those types of things. I think maybe the sort of the handshake between government and the individual needs to revolve around sort of the notion of what's going to get better and what's going to be delivered from that standpoint. And I think if government can convince people of that, and the citizens who are paying and preparing to pay those taxes can be open-minded to that, that can be a road to recovery. Governments operate on the basis of taxes, right? And so I think that is a notion of how people have to think about it. And so it's hard for me to get into the specifics because I don't know the intricacies of the different income levels and things of that nature. But if I were here and my taxes were going up, let's say, what can I expect to be better from that, and how are my government leaders communicating that to me? And then how do we hold them accountable? And if so, then that's probably a cost or an expense, if you want to think of that, the tax cost, that will in the end cumulatively be a positive for me. And I think the citizens, rationally need to sort of expect that.
Yeah. Sri Lanka has recently received debt moratoriums from India, China, and the Paris Club of Donors. And now we are in a position to ask for board approval for the IMF bailout of $2.9 billion US. How are these developments, in your opinion, how would they affect investor confidence in Sri Lanka and its markets?
Well, I think it's going to have a positive effect on investor confidence. I don't think there's anything that will take away from that. I think, the reality is that all of those things you mentioned are sort of contributions to trying to make a bad situation better. So naturally, you have a bad situation. So it's not confidence that just spikes without any sort of track record. So it gives the country an opportunity to work with other creditors, an opportunity to look at some of its spending and its structure, and make improvements. Ultimately, if you think about this economy, it's got exports and agriculture. Tourism is a very important notion. It has a strong youth population, which is important for paving the way into the future. Education is important, and so people want to be associated with countries or with groups of people who take ownership in that. And I think making some concessions and proving that the country is wanting to go in that direction will give people and companies confidence. I had an opportunity while I'm here to meet with different companies, some of them multinational and some of them local. And I do think countries can expect companies to think about the good and the bad. And there's been many good years, decades, for some of these companies in this, and they want to be supportive. And I think the changes you talk about give them sort of fuel inside corporate discussions, etc., to continue to be supportive, and that's really, really important.
Lastly, what advice would you give up-and-coming entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka? How may they tackle the inhospitable economic climate?
Yeah. So, look, We would argue from an accountancy perspective, you got to have good information, and that's got to drive a good business model. So just to say, I have an idea and I want to be an entrepreneur, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful. In fact, most entrepreneur ventures around the world in good economic times fail, right? And so how do you put discipline into the thought process up front, particularly if you're starting or you're trying to expand or something along those lines? What is truly my business model? How am I going to create value for a customer of some type, whether it's a corporate customer or an individual customer? So that is clearly important. It can't just be, I have a good idea and I'm going to put money into it. You have to think about it from a business model perspective, and that revolves around good data. I think secondly, you have to have staying power. I think no one is perfect when they're an entrepreneur. No one is just sort of throw something out there and magic is going to happen. It takes hard work, and you're going to learn from those mistakes. And so you have to have the ability to get through those. Now, this is probably not textbook, my third point. I personally believe passion is absolutely important in everything. Hopefully I convey a passion for our profession from your first question. I think as students, as people who go away and study and come home, they have to have a passion for their country. I think you have to have a passion for your business, because it's going to be hard. It's going to take a sacrifice of family and things of that nature. And but if you have that passion and you see it in the context of making your home country better, you have a much better chance of being successful.
Thank you, Mr. Melancon. I hope you enjoy your stay here in Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Shania. It was great to be here.